It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 343. Tonight I'm joined by Grace.
What? Hi.
Kodra.
Hello.
Tam.
I can't with this order, even though it's the same order.
Thalen.
A Hostess fruit pie is an empanada.
And a Pop-Tart is a ravioli. And Avatar The Last Airbender is anime. Fight me.
So last week we had this fun conversation around kind of Outriders and how it was leaving us a little dry.
Mm-hmm.
So I booted up. Tam was like, you know what's Outriders, but somehow less bleak? Mass Effect Andromeda.
It's a great game.
It's a great game.
I've never played this.
I feel like I need to replay it if everyone is going to play this thing, because it's been years at this point.
I'll be honest, I'm probably not playing the campaign. I am entirely here for Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, though. Which is what I understand is what I'm getting out of this Andromeda purchase I'm making. Because, yeah, like what Outriders was promised to me was I get to do Mass Effect 3 multiplayer again. But then I did the demo and was like, this is fun, but it just makes me sad in a way that sad games, like when I play a sad game and I feel sad, it feels good. When I play this game and I feel sad, I just feel empty and hollowed out inside.
I feel sad about Outriders for a totally different reason. And that's that the game has all this promise, but it's never going to land with this group.
But speaking of great promise that was unrealized, I booted up Origin, and what greeted me was, would you like to update Anthem?
No. No one wants to update Anthem. Anthem is dead in the water. It makes me very sad.
I mean, we wish someone would update Anthem.
We do wish someone would update Anthem.
Yes.
I mean, so this week in games I pine for, I pine for Anthem to work, but thing that I really need to do is install Hellgate London and get it up and running with the London 2038 server, because apparently it is this alternate world where that game never went offline and people continued to patch and add new content for it, and it's all user driven.
Isn't there like a super awesome VR edition now?
Oh god, that's what made me sad, is the Korean company that owns them keeps trying to make money from the dead corpse of Hellgate London.
Like, that just sounds like the most awful, like, just shambling mockery of a cash grab ever.
It is absolutely a cash grab. Like, they could sell it again and just call it VR. And, like, from what I understand, it's a very shoddy implementation of VR. But, so, like, yeah, I mean, Outriders makes me very sad that it never really worked. Anthem makes me very sad that it never really worked.
I feel like Outriders worked. It's just
Outriders works, but like it's the setting and having to go through. I've been playing a lot of the end game because I'm the only one playing the game. And I've been doing these things called expeditions, which take place after the main story. And like, even they're hopelessly bleak.
It's so frustrating and sad. I mean, I've been watching you play some on your YouTube channel, and like, I was gifted this game and played for, I don't know, less than the amount of time that you can play and still return a game on Steam. And yeah, had to return the gift because it's, even in that amount of time, it was just not a headspace that I wanted to engage with.
It's the worst game to release this year. Like, I mean, it's during this time, it's the wrong kind of game to release. And which is so sad because like mechanically the game's awesome. Like everything that it's doing is really interesting. It is the gold standard of looter itemization and crafting. Like hands down, it is what I want every kind of looter game to give me going forward.
I do feel like when things are going well, that's when you can have a game like this that explores like when people don't feel like there are existential threats or like that's when it's okay to sort of like dig deep into the darkness. Like I kind of joke, this is why the 90s all of media was so dark, is because I mean there were not great things happening, but people felt more secure.
There's a really interesting media theory about this. And it's a really, really interesting curve. Because really dark, like especially, you know, post-apoc, really dark stuff it has a resurgence when things are okay. But when things are actually great, it swings real hard the other way. Like if you look at all of the places where, if you look at places where there's like really soaring, really soaring like good things generally happening for people, or at least, I mean, not totally fair, but like good things happening for your average media consumer. So, you know, apply all of the appropriate filters there. But that's when Star Trek happened. That's when a whole bunch of utopian sci-fi happened. A whole bunch of aspirational genre fiction all took off. And like, I find that really, really interesting. But then when things are like, okay, then it's like there's a lot of getting really into sort of darker stuff as an exploration. And then when things are actually bad, there's this fascinating divide across various cultures where some cultures go back to reaching for the aspirational stuff as a like, hey, maybe things could be better. But there's the other side where it just like gets even darker and bleaker as a continued reminder of like, could be worse.
Well, like all of the 2000 AD comics, grim, dark characters, Judge Dredd, Rogue Trooper, basically all of these dystopian comics came out during the Thatcher austerity era.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Pink Floyd's The Wall came out during the Thatcher austerity era. You know, so like a lot of times countercultures are leaning into dystopian fiction as a way of dealing with their bleakness that they're going through, even when the rest of society is mostly okay.
Yeah.
But I also feel like some of those things that you mentioned are actually making some points about the bleakness. And so, I mean, I'm sure that there's some in there. And to be fair, I didn't play more than a couple hours. But so much of the bleakness that I saw, even just at the beginning of Outriders, just seemed to be for its own sake.
Here's the thing: is I think there are statements that were attempted to be made, but problem is like a lot of these dystopian fiction end up having a transformational aspect to them, where you know rebelling against the order leads to hope, and that never comes in Outriders. It's just
it makes a bunch of statements. It does make a bunch of statements, and it kind of takes way too long to actually make any statements. Although it's only
in the tail end. It's only in the tail end, and it does. Yeah. It's like it calls these things evil, but
yeah, I mean, it makes some statements. It makes some more unambiguous statements than like Spec Ops: The Line does.
Right.
And honestly, this game, like the closest comparison to another game I've played is Spec Ops: The Line. But like, I don't play Spec Ops: The Line for fun.
But,
yeah.
And the thing is this game is also okay. Spec Ops: The Line is at no point laughing at your brutality. Spec Ops: The Line is not trying to lighten the mood at all. And this game is. Like, Spec Ops: The Line is about, like, putting you in a pretty dark headspace. Whereas this still feels like, let's have some fun with all of this really darkness.
It feels less and less like that as you go. But here's the problem, is there's a lot of just ham-fisted writing and delivery in the game. I have noticed this as I have repeated content, because there's one mission that I like to run as kind of my test bed for, like, I have a new weapon. I'm going to go run this really simple mission that I can get it done real quick. It's the outhouse mission that I was talking about last week. And just that mission alone, like, there's this sense that they didn't understand the dialogue that was being presented, and they didn't understand what timing it should have, because, like, there's some weird stuff going on in that one specifically, and it made me think, like, I don't think they understood a lot of the dialogue that they're going for. And, like, this is not a English first game studio that built this thing. And, like, there's this weird delivery, and there's this whole part where, like, you turn on the camp lights and the lights make noise, and the delivery that you hear is, that's really loud. This is gonna, yep, there they are. And it's like this lifeless delivery of the lines of, like, oh no, here's some noise. It's going to attract attention. Oh yeah, no, it did attract attention kind of statement. But, like, it plays out in this weird, stilted manner that I wonder how much of why this feels bad is because the sound design is not great in this game. Like, the performances are not great from the VO. And maybe the performances are fine, but the editing of the VO was bad. The more I've played, the more I've noticed moments of, like, well, that just makes that seem even weirder because of the way that they ran things together that shouldn't be run together. Like, there should be some breathing room. There should be moments of reflection in some of the delivery that just never is there.
Yeah, there's the narrative design. I mean, the narrative design is reflected in the pacing and the fact that there aren't, like, the peaks and valleys, or not as many of the peaks and valleys as you would expect in a narrative, especially one that's trying to make you think about things. Like, it's jarring frequently.
Like, there's a lot of the quests that probably would have felt totally different if your character took a moment to reflect on what was happening, just with a sigh or, like, a pained noise as they were going through the process of saying the thing. But, like, all of that is missing from the dialogue, and it's just a bunch of lines being delivered, being played out with, like, this either completely dry take or attempting to be slightly comedic take.
Huh. Did you play as a male character?
Yes,
or
I did. Male character.
Oh, it might be actually much worse for you then.
Huh.
Because I was going to say, I actually think there were some moments where, like, the vague impression I got from the female character's presentation was more of a growing sense of frustration and exasperation at the awful situation everyone had put themselves in.
Yeah, but when I played the demo, the female main character was one of my favorite things about the game.
Yeah. Yes. Like,
a little bit that I've played of a female character, the delivery is much more natural.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's a FemShep thing. where it's just
Maybe.
like because I did play as a male character at first, and I was like, meh. Tried a female character and was like, oh, this lands a bit better, because you're like, the main character has a lot of lines, and like there is a distinct the voice actress has a distinct like growing frustration into like edging despair into open rage arc through the game, which matched my emotional mood throughout the game, basically right up until the very end.
The mail delivery is a lot. I mean, like, okay, I compared this in my blog, but basically it reminds me of Dante from Clerks. The I'm not even supposed to be here today delivery. So like a lot of things just kind of land flat in the delivery. But for me, if I could play a character with a beard, I will play a character with a beard. Anyway, so what I was going to say is like, I've been playing these expeditions and like, they're even super bleak. Like one of which was, you end up with some survivors at the end and it seems hopeful. And it's like, we're going to start a new colony out here and it's great. Or at least that's as close to that as you're going to get in the game. But then like one of the missions is like, oops, some survivors went off to try and recover a drop pod. And now you got to go rescue them. And oops, they all died.
Yeah. That tracks.
Okay. Like, why can't I save them? Would it have been that bad if you had just let me save them? Like I cleared the expedition in silver time. Surely that was fast enough to save them. But no. Anyway, I will eternally be sad that that game isn't going to be played by very many people, just because it's a fun experience. Like, it would be really fun with people, especially these expeditions, because like group tactics are really what they want, and I have me. So yeah. Like it's like I will never get gold on any of these things, just because as Devastator I can't clear fast enough. But like, I'm tanky as hell. I can stand up fight pretty much anything.
Well, I mean, and that was the thing for me because like I did one or two expeditions and I was like, yeah, these are still too dark for me. Like, but it awakened that like craving for that same like nice action class-based multiplayer co-op experience. And like, honestly, that's what got me to boot up Andromeda, because Andromeda plays very similarly, and we played a lot of Mass Effect 3 multiplayer for the most underrated multiplayer experience in video games that I've played. I'm trying to think if there's a more underrated multiplayer gaming experience.
I mean, there probably is, but we don't know about it because it's so underrated.
Right? So
underrated. I don't necessarily know how to segue into this one. But like, there's okay. So
in continuing disappointment.
I am in a weird headspace right now, because like, there's two games that are really important to me and have been important to me throughout the years. One of which is World of Warcraft, and I don't want to play that at all right now. I think I may be done with World of Warcraft permanently. I don't know. I do not understand what they're thinking, and every time they tweak something, it seems like it's going in the wrong direction. But so that's disappointment number one. Disappointment number two is I have been on the outs with Destiny for a while. There's something about the current formula that just doesn't do it for me, and there's been a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Because what is the most important part of an MMO? Fashion, the cosmetic systems. And for most of the time since Destiny 2 was released, they have been promising that they were working on a transmog system. And because WoW's the biggest game that had a cosmetic system for it, it got to name it, I guess. Since wardrobe systems existed long before World of Warcraft, but like everybody calls it transmog. So like, this is a thing that has been looming on the horizon, giving me hope that like maybe I'll feel different if I can look the way I want in Destiny. And when Beyond Light failed to land, one of the glimmers of hope that they gave us is that it would be coming very soon, that they would introduce the transmog system, and then it would be called armor synthesis. And they released a TWAB this week, which is This Week at Bungie. People call them TWABs. And they told us what armor synthesis is going to be, and it's real bad.
What? Why is it real bad?
It's real bad. Like basically, it took every fiber of my being not to just name the blog post "Fuck you, Bungie."
What is the worst? What is the worst cosmetic system you can think of? I know that you don't really engage with cosmetic.
I don't engage with cosmetic systems, but I think one that like you have to destroy the item and then pay to apply it.
Yep. And now add 2 currencies that you have to earn and transmute into each other throughout that process.
So okay, here's the rundown. Is Ada 1 is a robot that was part of the Black Armor expansion. It was a really cool expansion, but it was part of the shit that they nuked from orbit when Beyond Light came out.
So this is when they like shrunk the world?
They shrunk the world. They nuked like half the world.
Okay, so she needs a new job.
She needs a new job. So she's reappearing in the tower, and she gives you access to the armor synthesis machine. But wait, there's more. You have to go out on killing sprees and collect a currency called synth strands. And then you take those and you go visit Ada and you buy bounties that ask you to do specific things. And those bounties reward something called synth cord.
By the way, that's like 150 synth strand.
Yeah. It's not a limited amount. It's a large amount. But I mean, in theory, everything should be dropping it.
I mean, depending on how rapidly it drops, that
we've not gotten
that
to
part.
We've not gotten to the fuck you moment yet. This is all nonsense. This is Bungie nonsense. This happens every time they introduce something. There's a bunch of and also these I'm certain will take up inventory space. And for inventory space, there's already not enough inventory space for all of the things that take up inventory space already. And then you turn...
You've got synth cord into something called synthweave, and then you use synthweave to unlock something that you've already got in your collection and turn it into a armor ornament. Now, here's the part that is pissing everyone off, myself included. Like, that's a shitty way of getting unlocks, but I could deal with it.
Grind.
You are going to be able to earn 10 of these unlocks per season.
Oh.
No.
Oh, no.
Every 3 months, you can get 10 more unlocks. They release more than 2 armor sets per season. They are also going to sell these on the in-game store for $3 for a single token or a 5-pack for $10.
What a value.
So you can unlock.
I have hundreds of sets of armor in my collection. Hundreds and hundreds of sets of armor in my collection. Like, they gave us this collection system, making us think, oh, well, this is part of the eventual transmog system. We've been collecting armor sets. And then we get flagged as having credit for that armor. The initial thought was, oh, well, there'd probably be some minimal charge to apply it to your gear, but it's just going to use the collection system since we've been dutifully collecting this stuff for 3-4 years now. But no, this is, you're going to be able to get 10 per character, and they're locked to your class.
Okay,
so I can get 10 Titan armor pieces that I can unlock each season, 10 hunter, 10 warlock, etc. Or I can buy an unlimited number from the store.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. So you can buy as many as you want per season.
As many as you want per season.
So you can pay as much money as you want and be a giant whale. If you want. Cool.
Yeah, so fuck you, Bungie. You're the new fuck Konami. I just I am not sure I could have imagined a worse transmog system.
Now, does it cost resources to apply the stuff you do unlock?
I don't know. Probably not, because currently the armor ornaments don't cost anything to swap them on and off. It was early in year one. They introduced armor ornaments as kind of a half-assed transmog system, and any of the shop gear that came from Eververse, you could apply as an armor ornament version. Or if you ground your face off, there was like a Vanguard set, a Crucible set, an Iron Banner set, a Gambit set that you could eventually earn as ornaments. But like they were kind of hard to get. But like the combination of collections, the ability to pull old armor out of our collections, because we've been getting it and flagging our account with it. Plus the fact that like all of the Eververse items turned into ornaments kind of made people think that, we'll just be able to apply the rest of our gear as ornaments. Sweet. That works. So what's even more frustrating is like, I thought, well, maybe it's a technical limitation. No, they gave us a whole new paper doll just for cosmetics, and they've showed off screens of it. So it's not like they didn't already have to build in a new UI for this. It's real frustrating.
Sounds like it.
So the community is pretty much universally up in arms about this. I don't know if that will change anything. It did cause Bungie to backpedal on the sunsetting of weapons, because that's the last thing that they did that pissed everybody off universally. So we'll see. We'll see if it changes. But like, I think they've used up all my goodwill at this point, because nuking half the world sucked and it was a bad idea. Sunsetting the weapons sucked and it was a bad idea. And then when they rolled it back in a half-assed manner that like still left off some of my personal favorite weapons. And that one frustrated me because like realistically, there were probably a half dozen weapons that were out of band that were causing the problem and were the reason why they introduced sunsetting in the first place. And instead of fixing those half dozen cases where the weapon was just too powerful, they decided to remove most of the weapons in the game. So yeah, like this is a third strike for me.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of companies making bad decisions, how about Humble Bundle?
Yeah, it looks like IGN has decided that giving money to charity, that's not why people are into Humble Bundle. It's just like I don't know.
Has IGN always owned Humble Bundle?
No, they bought it about 3 years ago.
I did not realize that.
Yep. And so I guess it's been long enough that they've decided it's time to, start
cashing in?
Yeah, to start. Well, so here's the thing is basically the change that's being made is they're getting rid of the sliders. Like you will no longer be able to just to pick on via the sliders how much of the money that you are paying goes to what. Instead, there are two options. You can either give 5% to charity. I think it's 5% to charity, 10% to, or no, 5% to charity, 15% to Humble, and 80% to the publisher. That's right. I think
the publisher or the developer?
To the publisher.
Oh, the publisher. Okay.
Or you can give 15% to charity, and the publisher and the store each get 5% less than with the other option. So it's so it's actually the publisher that the increase is going to. So I don't know if this is like they've decided, well, to compete with the Epic Store, we have to give a bigger cut. And I mean, if that's what this is about, like I could see making that argument, but then they should make that argument and not just drop this out of the blue with no explanation and act like they're somehow improving the way that we're giving to charity with this.
Right. Because like their blog post is all, we've done all these tests and we're going to change this because like we think this is the best option. And no, I mean like it kind of changes what Humble Bundle is about in a large way. Because like Humble Bundle, you know, I would always max out like the charity slider whenever I bought something. And, you know, the thing is like I was pretty fluid with buying Humble Bundles because, you know, I thought it was, you know, going to a good cause.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times I give away the keys to people. But yeah, no, that's not going to happen anymore. I just won't use Humble Bundle, I guess.
Yeah, because I mean, at that point, if they don't have that, then why would you buy from them instead of just buying directly from Steam or Epic?
Right.
Because mostly what you're getting from them is game keys that then you then activate elsewhere. Like, rarely are you getting just a full DRM free download that is entirely independent of a different platform. So it just like.
It's a bad look. It's a real bad look.
Like maybe a change is needed, and maybe, you know, but they really need to communicate better about it at a minimum. Because the basically it's just everybody is angry about it. There's no I haven't seen a single like even neutral take on this anywhere. And like the fact that this dropped when it did sure makes it feel like we just wanted to throw this out there and then, you know, not answer any questions for, you know, 72 hours. So I don't know.
I mean, I've bought a lot of bundles over the years. Like, I have been a pretty reliable source of income for Humble Bundle, and that is stopping entirely. So yeah, it's just one of those weeks, it seems, where, you know, companies are doing bad things, dumb things. It's more dumb things than anything.
Yeah. So,
there's a school of magic.
There is
in a game that like isn't supporting someone that's horrible.
Yeah, Strixhaven, the School of Magic.
It also has a house devoted to my favorite combination of magical colors.
Black green.
Yes,
and best of all, that means you're being led by a big burly bearded dragon.
Yep.
I've been playing. Yeah, Strixhaven came out. It's really fun. It's like themed around a school of mages, and there's the 5 houses that are dedicated to 5 different color combinations, led by 5 different elder dragons. And the packs. I actually don't know how this works in paper Magic because I've only been playing it on Arena. But I think how it's working is the packs include both regular Strixhaven cards, like the new set, and then also a bunch of cool old spells that are not legal in Standard, but that could probably use some more reprints. But notably, they are legal in Limited. And this has led to a wild Limited environment. I don't know
if I remember correctly, this is stuff that's banned everywhere except randomly right now in Limited.
There's some stuff that is banned in quite a bit of formats. Like, you don't normally expect to get demonic tutored in a casual game of Magic. But that can totally happen now. Dark Ritual totally is a spell.
Yeah, and that one is shocking. They bring back Lightning Bolt as well?
Yep.
I mean, those 2 have been gone for a long time for a reason.
Well, and again, not legal in Standard, not legal in many formats, but you could sure just get got in your limited games. Like, I've get Day of Judgment and like, oh yeah, I'm gonna.
Didn't they also bring back Ancestral Recall as well?
No.
That's a little too broken.
No, that's on the reserved list. They're not allowed to reprint that.
Okay, so they didn't bring back the full cycle of the spend 1 mana, get something ridiculous.
No,
for
they
it.
did not. Well, because no one cares about healing salve.
Yeah.
No one has ever cared about healing salve.
No, healing salve has always been bad.
But you can run into a natural selection in limited, which is hilarious in a sacrifice-focused out thing. I'm playing a deck right now that has is all about playing lands, because the blue-green color school is all about having 8 or more lands, or having more lands matters. Like, there's a card that lets you play a fractal that has as many +1/+1 counters as lands you have. It gets big. But no, like, I watched a video from Graham from Loading Ready Run in which he stormed out because Grape Shot and Tendrils of Agony are in the Magical Archives. And so I think he had a spell that was double the next spell, or copy the next spell you play. So he played that, then he played Lightning Bolt, dealt 6 that way. He played a pump spell, he played an X spell for 0, and then he played Grape Shot and hit them for Grape Shot for 5, and got exactly to their life total. Because that's how, like, this is how, like, standard games are played. This is how cube Magic is played. This is not how limited Magic gets played.
Yeah, the speed, I imagine, is way faster than it ever is.
It's not necessary. The speed is still relatively slow. It's just the plays are bigger. Like, you'll get got by a spell and be like, whoa, like, this game has turned dramatically now because you had access to a spell I was not ready for. But it's still limited. Limited is not going to be a very fast format ever. Like, you're mostly not playing a lot of 1-drops, and 1-drops you are playing, like, usually it's a bad idea just because they aren't impactful enough.
So are you playing draft or constructed?
I am currently playing sealed, which is limited. So
yeah, that's what I meant, sealed, not constructed.
Yeah. It's 6 packs. Open them up, put them together. I want to get a little bit more comfortable with sealed, and then I'll probably start drafting once that ends. But I imagine the draft environment's going to be pretty fun. Unsurprising to anyone, really like Quandrix, blue-green for life. Haven't gotten to play with the Quandrix Elder Dragon, though. The Belladross, Witherbloom, is broken. And, yeah, he'll end the game real quick.
Who's the white-black Elder Dragon?
Shadrick Silverquill. He's very interesting because he gives... You get 3 different options. You can create a 2/1 flyer. You can give all creatures +1/+1/+1 counter that you control, and then you can also pay 1 life to draw 1 card. And you get to pick 2 of these 3 effects every single combat, and you get 1 and you give your opponent 1. So you have to figure out how to break the symmetry there. You get to choose, what do I think is the best for me and the worst for my opponent to get, but you're still giving them probably something, unless they just have no creatures on their board. Or maybe you've got their life total low enough that pressuring their life is threatening enough that drawing a card isn't worth it, but paying 1 life for 1 card is almost always worth it. So, no, it's very interesting. That's a very interesting dragon. I did not do well when I had them, but the one game I got to play them, it was very fun. And they were very successful at letting me win.
I thought it was interesting that they exclusively chose, like, enemy colors instead of the allied colors.
I mean, a lot of things are trying to be they're trying to support a little bit more enemy colors, but enemy colors have been doing pretty well because, I mean, they kind of cover each other's bases.
Yeah.
With one notable example being, I don't think red white has a good identity. I think
okay. The problem is it's red white, but it's trying really hard not to be Boros.
Well, yeah, but I don't actually like. I mean, again, it depends on what I'm playing. Red white is not an interesting commander color set because it's the two aggro colors in a format that does not want people playing aggro.
Well, and like a lot of these colors are going off brand for what you're expecting for that color combination because like white black has been for a while, oh, you're playing vampires.
Yeah, and now it's this sort of like counters matters thing. Yeah, it's a little off brand. Like the green black feels more white black than white black does.
Like the green black does not feel Golgari.
I do think green and blue still feel very like they are not doing quite the Simic thing. Like in fact, as mentioned, the white black is doing more of this counters matter, which is traditionally where you look at Simic, but it still somehow feels very green and blue because you're trying to go big on lands. I imagine Quandrix is going to be a well-loved Commander staple because Commander is a format where you get to play a lot of lands. I like that Magic keeps getting its green decks to the point where they're like, all right, now once you get to 6 mana, then you can really start ramping your mana. Because there's several spells now where it's like, this is a 6 mana spell that goes and fetches 4 lands out of your deck.
So are you mostly playing on phone or are you playing on PC?
Oh yeah, I'm almost exclusively playing on phone. It feels very good on a phone.
The mobile client really does work well. Like I appreciate how good it is. And really like prior to this, I think my favorite mobile client was Hearthstone, which I feel like, I don't know, Arena does a better job of being Hearthstone than Hearthstone did. But like Hearthstone was just trying to be virtual Magic.
Well, Hearthstone feels like Hearthstone is a simpler design from the core rules of itself. You aren't having stops. It's not a reactive game in the sense that you are not able to react to your opponent doing things. There's a lot more like, all right, hey, do you want to do something in response to this? Do you want to do something in response to this? Hearthstone thought that in order to crack the nut of like a mobile digital card game, it really needed to be as like you play all your spells now, you sequence everything in a very particular way, and that's where the strategy comes in. But it's more about what can you do on your turn, and then what can they do on their turn. Which, I mean, a lot of games have gone that route because it makes the game a lot more approachable and a lot more accessible.
Well, it's also way easier to code.
And it's way easier for UX to make it feel good. Yeah. Because you're not stopping and starting all of the time. But
like, I feel like Arena does a good job of smoothing past the things that you don't need to care about, but also letting you set your own stop points if you specifically care about a thing.
Yeah, well, Arena, again, I imagine there are people who are better at Arena and can identify when their opponent has hit a stop and when they have not, because you could theoretically be like, oh, I think, they're pausing right now. They probably must have an instant in their hand. Writes down they have an instant in their hand or something like that. But, I mean, that's a level of play I'm not quite to yet. Like, it's one of those things that happens in Magic is trying to figure out, based on people's reactions, do I think they have an answer to what I'm doing, and they're trying to decide whether to cast it or not. Whereas in Magic Arena, it's a lot more obvious whether they do, because the game will actually pause for them.
Fascinatingly, that is a lot of my that was a lot of my Magic play, both earlier and more recently, is trying to gauge what my opponents have based on their reactions.
Well, like it's a play style. Like if there is a thing that you absolutely need to land, a lot of times you throw out something you don't care if it gets countered, just to try and bait the person into countering it. But like the problem is, whatever that bait is needs to be sufficiently pressuring as to not look like bait.
Yeah, well, and more importantly, like when I'm playing, I'm always asking, okay, how do I handle this? If I can handle this with the tools I have on the board, then I don't care. Like I'm gonna just let it resolve. So you need to get something that makes me think, oh no, I need to deal with that in order to bait a removal or something. Unless I'm just glutted with removal. And I'm just trying to clear the way to win.
And a lot of times if you're playing around a specific combo, that thing landing means a lot more to your deck than it may to somebody else's deck.
Well, and that's the other thing kind of relevant to this conversation is like, usually you have no idea what they're playing. Well, in Magic Arena, I don't play the best of 3 matches for the most part. Because those are a little bit too much of a time commitment for me.
Okay, so Tam, I think this is your card. Talespire. I have no idea what Talespire is.
Talespire is one of the newest in a series of virtual tabletops. And it's... I'm trying to figure out like the right angle to start with this one. So what Talespire is doing is Talespire is making it really, really easy for you to make a nice isometric map.
Okay.
So you can make, I mean, you can whip up a pretty functional like isometric map, like I think Diablo, with tiles that you're placing down, and you can set up the world, and it's this nice immersive feeling space that you can play games in. You can drop tokens, you can give players permissions to like interact with interactable objects like doors. You can hide traps, imagine if you had just an infinite set of Legos and you did all of your battle maps in Lego for your RPG. And it's really neat. It's really neat, and it is a reminder to me that almost every virtual tabletop is made by one of 2 types of people: artists or programmers. because every VTT I've looked at is doing one of 2 things. It is either making it super easy to it is either showing off by making it super easy to make visual spaces and represent your game visually, and completely eliding the actual game mechanics completely. Just like, nope, we're going to give you a dice roller, and we're going to give you a dice roller full stop. Like a dice roller and maybe a chat interface full stop. We're not going to give you anything else. We're simulating the feeling of sitting around a table with character sheets that you actually reference, rolling dice. The board is the thing. And on the other side, it's take a look at everything we can automate. We can automate everything. We can automate the whole game.
Yeah, I've got a friend that just rolled his own Foundry server so that he could set it up as a VTT. Right. In part because he could go in and program things to make it work the way that he wanted it to.
Right. And you've got and you get things like Foundry, you get things like Roll20, you get things like Fantasy Grounds, all doing that. Like, we're going to import the whole game system and all of the rules, and we're going to automate everything for you. We'll even have a character creation wizard. And it's interesting, as someone who is neither an artist nor a programmer, but familiar with both, I'm continually fascinated at how thoroughly both of those approaches miss what the other one is doing and fail to learn from it. Because like I don't think I could get my local group to do anything in Talespire. Not because it's a bad system. I think it's actually pretty great, but because it does absolutely zero automation. There's no like tinkering to do. You'd have to like manage your character sheets outside of the game. You have to, roll dice and add them manually. Like it's a very manual play process. Even though the representation is very immersive. And like on the other side of it, it's interesting to look at, something like Foundry, where if you're missing any piece of the automation, it chokes and dies. Like you need the Rube Goldberg machine to work, or you're going to be fighting through, telling players what / commands to type in. And like, if you have a bunch of players who all live and breathe / commands, whatever, no one's going to notice. But like, introduce even one person who's not, and something like Foundry is just opaque. And I find the whole thing really interesting because it sort of showcases both what do you actually need, what do you need to play a tabletop RPG, and like what kinds of things do you need to make that a functional virtual experience?
It's
One of the
interesting.
things
Go ahead.
One of the things I find interesting is when you were describing it, I was immediately thinking of the engine that D&D was trying to get Troika to build, because like their entire thing was creating a virtual tabletop that was isometric that allowed you to play a game a la, a Fallout or something like that, and present it that way.
I mean, I would say that Talespire delivers on that promise, at least what I've seen. I mean, it's also got, it has one of the cleverest systems I've seen in something like this, because the biggest problem that you run into with something where you can build your whole area out of building blocks is it's a giant time sink. Like, first to learn how to put the tools together, and even just to build something, you're talking hours and hours and hours of crafting to build the thing that you want. But what Talespire does is it uses plain text it basically uses plain text codes to, I think, XML. I don't even think it's as complicated as XML. It's something else. But like something that you can copy to your clipboard in Windows to represent creations that you can paste. So if somebody else creates something neat, it's easily shareable. And it just drops in. Like, so you end up with this really thorough crowdsourced art library, basically. And it's one that if it's not quite what you need, it's pretty easy to adapt to what you need. Like, oh, hey, I like this dungeon layout, but I want it to be, plants instead of stone. That's a super easy change. It's like find and replace these tiles with other tiles. Or like, oh, I want there to be a courtyard here. Like, yeah, you can do that.
So do you build with like prefabs, or is it tile sets, or?
It's mostly tile sets, but you can drop in prefabs via the text thing. And if a prefab gets big enough, then like if you have a thing that's a large enough prefab, you can export it as a scene, more basically, where it's got sort of all of everything that you put into it. But for like houses and stuff, or like most buildings, or a town square, a smallish town square, you can just like copy text to clipboard, paste into mouse, and it just drops in as a prefab, which is then editable.
Sounds like it also might be particularly good for like a storyteller type system where your rules are a little bit more lightweight.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a grid and want to move tokens on it, it's really great. What were you saying was interesting, Kodra?
I was going to say, I feel like it matters because you're saying, well, for the programmer focused ones where there's a lot of heavy / commands and a lot of automation, it matters that people understand how to do it. But But one of the benefits of those games is it allows, if they have automated everything and you can just build your character in their character generator and then play the game, then what it also means is you don't necessarily need to know all of the crunchy rules. Like, you can just be like, my character want to attack this goblin. I go up to it and I say I attack it, and I don't need to okay, so what's my modifier here to figure out, do I hit this thing or not? The game kind of tells you.
Yeah. But what I think is, I think that's the dream, but I've never seen one actually accomplish that.
Well, I think the dream is, I want to play pen and paper with my friends, but make it a video game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, do all the stuff behind the scenes. I mean, and to some extent, this is why I think that this is why I'm always interested in what are really, really high tier, user friendly character creator tools. Yeah,
but even that then means that in a game where there's more tactical grid stuff, there's a whole bunch of location based modifiers. It would be nice for me to be I see I am within 30 feet of my bard who has currently activated their bard song. So the game just tells me, yep, I've got +1 to hit and +1 to damage. Because no one ever remembers the bard song modifier.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the super automation heavy systems would be good if they actually delivered on that. But even in the cases where they might, it is still this. It is a heavy burden to set all of that up. That's not easy.
Yeah, but ideally you have it where it's just a library somebody can import.
Yeah,
well, I wonder if maybe this should be piecemealed out. That someone should work on building the best character creator that they can, that exports into a bunch of formats, and then these virtual tabletops can read in those formats, and then they can just focus on the mechanics of the tabletop, but also map builder tools.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that would be, I think that would be great, but you'd need to actually get the Wizards and Paizo and Fantasy Flight and all of those groups on board.
Yeah.
And
and therein lies the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have this thing where it's you're skirting the line. You're skirting the lines on is this okay? Pretty hard, which prevents you from doing the stuff that would actually work well.
Well, and you're also dealing with competing priorities, because if you are having to pay for licensing, then you want to drive as many users to your product. So you maybe it takes away the incentive to work real well seamlessly with all the other products.
Right. You sort of half-ass all of your stuff, half-ass a lot of things. And honestly, it's one of those things where I would love to see a system, a VTT that actually achieves the level of promised automation. But boy, when it's only 80% of the way there, it's so frustrating. Because it's because then you have the thing where it's automating some things and not other things, and your players have to figure out on the fly which things are being automated and which ones aren't, which ones are included properly on the character sheet.
Yep.
Which ones are turned on.
Well, and the thing that I've always found in this space is a lot of times the one that gains traction isn't necessarily the best at any of those things. For map building, for example, Campaign Cartographer has been the thing that lots of people have used for a really long time, and I find it horrible. I hate Campaign Cartographer. It never worked for me the way I wanted it to.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've seen, I've been using Hero Lab, and Lancer's CompCon has this. You can play they have a thing they have a pretty nice character creator, and then you can actually play a character. But when you're playing it, it's like there's no vision. There's no like, you're not actually like seeing anything. It's just an interactive character sheet. So you need some other mechanism to track it, to like show you what's actually happening. But you've got this like interactive mechanism that sometimes even so what I'm looking for, sometimes even plugs into, like, it's multiplayer. The DM can actually pull all the players in and affect their character sheets manually, just with no visual field to reference, which is like a lot of the automation that you're getting out of something like Foundry, but then no visual element. And it's like, okay, where do you get a visual element from now? Which in theory is what something like Talespire is good for. But then you've got people in 3 different screens trying to keep track of what's going on.
Well, and I think the other big challenge that you end up battling is when I say I want to play a pen and paper game, what I mean by that may not be what most of the players mean by that. And as a result, everybody wants something slightly different out of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of, I mean, and this is just endemic to the experience of being a DM for any kind of tabletop RPG. But the everything in tabletop RPGs just assumes that the DM is going to carry the entire world on their backs and like is going to pour hours and hours and hours of effort and time into, setting up the game, to the point where even a lot of DMs themselves talk about like, oh yeah, I'd spend 12 to 16 hours ahead of every session, making sure that everything is prepared. And so like that point of pride means there's not a lot. It means that every game has this big, like, sucking vacuum that is assumed that the DM is going to fill. And making that role easier is just not a priority anywhere, which is interesting. It makes for an interesting thing because there's now a fairly thriving cottage industry of DMs for hire. Like I was talking to somebody who makes like $40,000 a year as a side gig DMing.
That's interesting.
I mean, it makes sense. You want to play a game, so...
So it makes me wonder if what is missing from the equation here is basically a roguelite for adventures. So like a piece of software that you plug in some parameters and it will get you 90% of the way there in an adventure, and then the DM takes over, tweaks the last 10%.
Well, even so, this exists. Like, this is what modules are. Like, there are well-written modules. But even those, I mean, to be well-run, they require prep time. Like, otherwise, it's what I'm doing, which is sort of flipping back and forth through books, trying to be like, what is going on now? What... They did something different that the module didn't expect. How do I adjudicate this?
I always hated running modules. I always like in any given situation back when I was DMing a lot, I would rather just go from scratch than use a module.
Well, for me, it's I don't know how to be prepared. Like the work that Tam is describing is something I'm not comfortable with. And so, like, if I'm gonna do it, like, I want to have something to fall back on.
It was just so much easier for me to wing it than if I was doing my own thing, than to wing it if I was trying to follow somebody else's lead. Like, if the whole thing was like my imagination, then it was easier for me to just make up things that fit along with that than to try and make up something on the fly when we went off module. Because I know Tam has to encounter times when the players have gone off plan and is just making stuff up. Like, that has to happen.
I mean, so it used to happen a lot more than it happens now. But that's mostly and like admitting my own bias about DM preparedness here. Like I'm very proud that I've gotten my per session prep time down to about 30 to 45 minutes. But the most time consuming thing for me is making sure that I have an encounter prepared, which is definitely a thing. But requires a bunch of crunchy work that if I could plug in, I need an encounter with this type of mob for this level, and then a bunch of thematic parameters. I'd be all over that. Just plug that in,
exactly.
Give me an encounter, cool, drop it in.
Because I'm doing a thing. I need this gap filled. This gap is going to take me an hour or two just to copy stats.
Yeah, exactly.
But if I can tell a thing, okay, I am going to a vampire castle. Yep. Give me some thematic elements for that vampire castle. I'll shape it from there. But here's a list of encounters. Here's the butler that's a ghoul. Sweet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and one of the things the criticism that's rightfully leveled at me as a DM is that I'm pretty light on combat. And that's because running virtual combat is really time consuming. The couple of times that I've done a dungeon, a dungeon might have 10 to 12 rooms, which is pretty small for a dungeon, as far as some of the bigger module stuff gets. But that's 4 sessions. When we're talking 2 months of play before there's any 2 months of play that's mostly wandering through a place, finding out a few narrative items and having combats, that's a little hard to swallow.
Mm-hmm. I mean, some people like that.
It's true.
Yeah, I mostly played in games prior to y'all that were, I would say, 70% combat focused. And most of the ones I ran were largely combat focused.
I mean, for me, classically, I have used, pre-established settings and modules, for the individual adventures. But I don't know. I think part of it is I have so many to choose from because I have a huge collection of Dungeon Magazine and lots and lots of adventure modules that I can mix and match bits and pieces out of different adventures if necessary and modify as needed. Together. Yeah, I cannot think the last time that I ran a module strictly as written. I'm always modifying something. If nothing else, I'm modifying the adventure hook and the final boss and various things like that to fit into the overarching story that I'm trying to tell.
As you were saying about some of the art assets, I might take a module and overlay a different thematic approach to it. So I might keep the layouts of things and the pacing of things, but I might substitute a completely different theme for big chunks of it.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I've used Temple of Elemental Evil before for things that are other than that.
One of the huge things that it's immensely useful to have the modules for is there's so many dungeon maps and rooms and various encounters, and I can if I need an encounter of a particular type, I can leaf through some adventures and find something that'll fit and just yank it out and drop it in there.
I mean, eventually somebody is going to discover and point out to me that I've used the same encounter map, the same battle map in every grid-based combat game for the last decade, with very minimal edits in some cases. I did invert the colors one time.
I don't know. I feel like that's expected. How many times have I run Keep on the Borderlands, and it's never been the same adventure twice?
Yeah, I mean that was actually the thing that's gotten my prep time down so far. Is I used to pour huge amounts of prep time into all of these different branching possibilities for like, what if the players do this? What if the players do this? Let's think of every possible thing I can think of that the players might do. And then they go off and do some other thing that I didn't think of.
Yeah. No, yeah. My standard is I've got the adventure. I've got like the primary possibilities that they're most likely to follow up on, pretty well established. I've got a handful of encounters of various sorts in my back pocket, in case of various situations. And like, honestly, if they go so wildly off script that I don't have anything prepared that would handle it, I mean, I'm just going to straight up be like, okay, this has gone in a completely different direction than I anticipated. I'm going to need some time. But that honestly doesn't happen very often. But yeah, I used to prepare like much more, and so much of it never got used. And yeah.
Yeah, well, I started turning all of that into modular chunks that I can then, like, all right, yeah, it makes sense. I can just plug this in here, use that one. Yep. All the like unused threads in various games, like, yeah, we can adapt to this one to plug it in here.
Find a new place to, yeah. Like, I mean, I've also kind of amassed a library of encounters that have like been particularly interesting or memorable in the past. That, if I've got a group of players that didn't, that none of them were involved in that game that encounter was in before, well, if a situation comes up where that encounter would fit, sure, I'll throw it at them.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things, a big reason that I have latched heavily onto Pathfinder 2 as a DM is because it has the best, by far, encounter design rules that I have seen in any tabletop game. Like, if I need to, I can whip up a Pathfinder 2 encounter from scratch in about 5 minutes. And I can be more or less assured that it's not going to randomly kill my players, and it's going to be at about the difficulty that I intend. And like, boy, is that a relief. Because I've had games, especially that if they go on for a while, where due to the nature of the system and the people playing in it, I just like give up on trying to guess at difficulty and just throw stuff at the players. And I'm like, is this going to kill them? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. They're level 7 and this is 4 CR9s. I don't know. Sure.
It's impossible to gauge.
Like, I don't know. Oh, hey, here's a fight where they're like, man, that felt unfair. And I was like, that was built straight from the encounter. And like, here's another fight where they're like, this was a trivially easy fight. We should fight something harder next time. And I was like, that fight should have killed you. That fight was supposed to be deadly.
I feel like I encountered one of those scenarios where you didn't expect me to go in shooting and I go in shooting, and the things weren't as hard as we expected, except for I almost got a bunch of people killed because nobody else was combat ready.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's like, how's that going to play out? We've mostly reined in the extreme min-maxing. That used to be a thing. Now I will run D20 systems because I don't have to worry about it. For like 4.
The what?
Like 4 different people who min-max in various ways. Like, how do I design an encounter?
Yeah, it can be rough.
For a team of people that includes the unstoppable force, the immovable object, and Sonic the Hedgehog. And then one relatively normal person who's like along for the ride. Who's
gonna get run over if they encounter the other stuff. That was actually the problem in a game that we ran in college, I remember. We had, and I will always remember, it was referred to as the Rob's Paladin problem. Because there was a bunch of us who were like big, tanky dwarves who were going to be able to fight just about anything. And the DM was finally like, was like, okay, we're gonna put a challenge that really pushes the limits of what your characters can do, and then put the monsters in the front of the caravan where Rob's Paladin was. And Rob's Paladin was the one character that was not min-maxed and got just completely pasted in one round. And then the rest of us came up and mostly just handled all of those monsters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and sometimes like stuff pops out that you're just not expecting. Like I remember playing in one of your games and like you're like, boss does this, and I'm like, I'm dead, right? Like just dead. Oh.
This is awkward.
Let me check my notes.
We're like, let's Prince of Persia that a little bit. But it's easy to get there.
Yeah.
And it's like you're like, oh, huh.
That's, I mean, as I recall, it was one of those things where it's because the rules for instant death need to be a little bit more generous in games. Or a little bit more forgiving so that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's when I ignore the rules.
Yeah, which is what I think we ultimately did.
I mean, like one time in particular, like I was in fact running the Keep on the Borderlands, and the party came up on an ogre, and that ogre got a crit against the sorcerer, and that sorcerer was dead. And I stopped for a moment and thought for a second, and then a cowled figure teleported in, said, "Wait, no, that wasn't supposed to happen. We need to fix this." Murdered the ogre, resurrected the sorcerer, and disappeared just after they were able to realize that was a mind flayer. And that became the overall story of the campaign. And ended up working remarkably well.
Yeah. Yeah, mysterious NPC showing up sometimes fixes that. I've had to do that one too.
Like the
but
short
then it's
version,
really hard to extract the NPC back out sometimes.
Yeah, the short version is that it turned out that character was the last blood descendant of an ancient lich who had been imprisoned generations ago, who could only be freed by their descendant, and well, they accidentally did that thing.
Sounds unfortunate.
Yep. The city ruled by a council of approximately 24 maximum level wizards was completely overrun and transformed into a necropolis.
I mean,
it was bad.
You know what they say, beware of mind flayers bearing gifts.
That is, I think, the struggle VTTs have, though, is it is a lot harder to improvise on them. That's like talking about this, and it's like, oh man, I would have to make a grizzled old wizard token, bring them into the scene. Like, if I want to throw together a random encounter, somehow I can easily draw a map or like build some things, and it looks decent on a board, on like a dry erase board, and in a way it just doesn't on a VTT.
Yeah. Because I could just sketch something out real quick on the wet erase map.
Yeah,
and it's fine.
Well,
yeah,
and part of it too is like a lot of what VTTs are giving you is a certain level of transparency to the rolls and the attacks, but like sometimes that transparency works against the players.
Oh no, GM roll all of it. Don't let them know how much you're cheating in their behalf or against them. Doesn't matter.
I will say that is one thing that I think Foundry does that might actually be better than in-person physical tabletop.
The ability to just I'm going to make this a blind roll, and GM, you can see what I roll and decide what I get to know.
Yeah, like there's this interesting hidden information aspect in Pathfinder 2 where for stuff like knowledge checks or perception checks or like stealth checks, the idea is that you tell the DM what your modifier is, and the DM rolls for you and knows what you got, but you don't, other than whatever narrative cues you get. But that takes away a lot of the fun of rolling dice and hitting your button to roll dice or like rolling the dice yourself or whatever the case may be. And in the VTT, there's a cool mechanism for blind rolling so that you don't see the result, but the DM does. So you get to actually roll, but...
Have you seen the twin tower dice towers where you can put it in one tower and it rolls it to the GM, and you put it in another tower, it rolls it to the players?
I have not.
It's pretty awesome.
That's clever. That's pretty neat.
Because then, yeah, it's like, okay, you want it? Pop it in the blind roll, and then they get to still, like, take their dice and roll it, and the GM is the one who gets to see it.
I mean, GM screens existed for a reason.
Yeah, but GM screens existed, but, like, that meant the GMs were rolling all of the dice and seeing all of the results. This is what lets the player feel like they are still making their roll, but only the GM gets to see the result.
Yeah.
I might need one of these. I need to find one of these. I had not heard of these, other than like the magician trick.
Oh man, I bet there's one where you could pretty easily make it so that it has like a switch in the bottom, so that you like turn it to GM side or player side. I bet I could fabricate something like that. That'd be really cool. Yeah.
This has just amplified my desire to run in-person tabletop.
Yep. I
actually don't even know if I know how at this point. I haven't, other than like the occasional one shot, I haven't run an in-person tabletop game in like 7 years.
I can feel the difference between me running on VTT and running in person. Like, I have a frenetic LARPing energy to me that I don't get to get out when I'm doing virtual tabletops.
Yeah, on VTTs, nobody can see my like mad scramble to whip something up.
But you're totally right. Running a dungeon is so much fun in person, and just it is a slog on a VTT.
Oh yes, it's a painful slog. Like,
part of me is almost to the point where I'm tempted to like shut down the game I'm currently running because I don't think it translates to virtual tabletop well.
Just like pause it until...
Yeah, I really want to get to like the conclusion, but because yeah, like it's definitely designed for longer sessions in person where you're like, okay, we're gonna go here, and it's like, all right, let me set up another quick map and we'll do that next. But like, there's a rhythm you need to get into with some of these modules that gets like the rhythm of a tabletop game gets interrupted by trying to fight the VTT.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is stuff that makes me more intrigued in something like what was the Talespire, because if it can just be we're sitting around a map and it's like we're going to go here, but even then, I'm guessing it's going to be too slow to like swap context switch between all of the things, and like it's not like you can just easily put your minis out and whatnot.
I don't know. I've never tried to run a game in that kind of VTT, so I have no idea what that would be like. You know, maybe it's easier because it's so much more lightweight.
I think we're probably at end unless we've got final comments. Okay. Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.